and maybe you need a running back, and both Devin Neal and DJ Giddens are on the board, which way are you going for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Boy, that's tough. And like I know it's tough to just look outside of the prism of like the Chiefs, but even like scheme specific, like I think both of these guys present different things to different schemes.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here as always with Ryan Wallace, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. Tonight, we have a very timely guest that we'll get into in just a few minutes, right after the NFL Combine, I will say. So stay here for that interview. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us with the algorithm, help us to grow the show, and put us in front of more people like you. Without further ado, Ryan, can we get an alarm?
Let's do it. This is long overdue. Long overdue.
Ask and ye shall receive. A week ago, we talked about Shawnee Heights wideout Tyren Parker, our number 6 player in the state, and how he pushed back his commitment. Well, he is uncommitted no longer, with the talented athlete making his pledge to Kansas. Ryan, I know we feel like Parker has as much upside as anyone in the state. What are your thoughts on the new Jayhawk?
Well, long time coming for this one, so we're going to leave the alarm and the siren going in the background. Congratulations to Tyren, by the way.
No.
This is a good get for Kansas. I love the fact that you get a kid that is an in-state player that I think immediately bonds and gels through previous connections with, the rest of the Kansas that they already have in this class. Like, he and JJ Dunnigan are very close, and let's be honest, Kevin, he and JJ Dunnigan, you would think between now and whenever they arrive on campus at KU are going to help better each other. Right. Iron sharpens iron, so to speak. But, we've talked about it before. Tyren is, far from a finished product, but the ceiling for him is as high as just about anybody in this class in the state of Kansas. And I think when I saw him at DeSoto this last year, you see incredible length. You see the explosion that he has. I'm interested to see kind of how he continues to develop the route tree, kind of the downfield burst. Can he separate? He's got the acceleration right off the bat, but what can he get that downfield 40-yard dash type of 40, 50, 60-yard time to? I think that the more he works with the strength and conditioning staff at KU, the more that he works on just becoming a true wide receiver, you're going to see him really grow. And honestly, Kevin, as we've talked about on this show, I think that starts this fall. I think what we saw from him as a junior this past season for Shawnee Heights was him just scratching the surface. We said it a number of times, like that was kind of his varsity intro. I mean, he played as a sophomore, didn't really have the true quarterback, though. This past season, he goes out, leads, I think, maybe not the state in receiving yards, but I think Kansas City, Kansas, in terms of the teams that play Kansas City League schools, led them in receiving yards. And I think that's just a taste of what's to come for him as a senior.
A lot of potential there. Moving on to local high school news. Sean Martin has stepped down as Ray-Pac head coach. Ryan, this should be a really highly coveted job at a school that regularly produces big-time talent and has shown the ability to both compete for and win state titles, including, was it 6A in 2020? The last one?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say we're only a couple years removed from them winning it all, and having a Simone winner on their team. And you're right; they've been producing guys at a fairly high clip. I mean, even if you're you're familiar with the Jaden Dosses, right? You're familiar with the Jane Riddells. Obviously, DeZephan Walker is going to make that. And if it wasn't a coveted job already, it definitely, to have a running back like him in your stable as a new coach, that immediately draws attention. But even beyond the Power 4, Power 5 type guys. They've had a number of other guys that have gone on to have really high level careers at, the FCS level, MIAA levels, and so on and so forth. So I think the pieces are all in place. I mean, we've been to games out at Ray-Pac, and when that place is rocking, it's as intimidating as any kind of local environment, I think, on the KCMO side. The community really loves football out there. And as we've said, they've established a foundation there. So whoever comes in, yes, they've fallen on some hard times of late, but there's still a crop there. And I think the soil, I guess, so to speak, in terms of like your middle school programs and your youth programs are still very fertile. Jeremiah Hull is a name that we haven't really mentioned on this show yet. And a lot of people probably don't know about him because he's a 2028 receiver, but he's on the up and up, folks. So, and he's in the Ray-Pac school district. So this is a coaching job that I think is going to have a long list of suitors. I've already heard some names kind of tossed around. I don't want to mention them because I don't know if those rumors and reports are how accurate they are. I trust my source, but I think that we'll end up getting a recognizable name for this job. And Kevin, I'm very, very curious to see how quickly we see Ray-Pac rebound, because the pieces are all there for them to really get back on the track fairly quickly.
How many times over the years have we gone out to Ray-Pac and you've known that you were looking at Jaden Riddell, you've known you were looking at a Jaden Doss or somebody like that, and then you're like, well, that's a dude that I didn't know about. That's a dude I don't think that I knew about. It always feels like talent kind of bursting at the seams there, and it always seems like they have more guys than you even think that they have.
Mm-hmm.
I also, Ryan, this wasn't on our rundown, but I wanted to give you a chance to take a quick victory lap. His Kansas athlete, Jaren Kanak, who started his career at Oklahoma at linebacker, moved to tight end, start spring practice at Oklahoma for the Sooners. Thoughts?
Yeah, I said I would die on this hill, and guess what? I'm not dead, and I'm still on the hill. Here's the thing about Jaren is, like, he's as good of an athlete as you and I have ever covered coming out of the state of Kansas. I mean, it's just kind of freakish stuff that he's able to do. We talk, fans of the show know what we think about Lincoln Cure. I mean, Jaren Kanak was on that level, if not maybe even more so than Lincoln, in terms of just like freakish athletic ability. And the thing I always said with him coming out of Hayes, Kevin, and not to say you disagreed, or even, guys like Randy Withers or anybody disagreed, I think we were all kind of on the same page. Maybe I was just more typical me, plant my flag in the ground, but like, I knew that he could become a linebacker, but the progression, the transition, I think, to get him to where we all thought he could be as a linebacker was going to take a little bit more time. He had already played and kind of always played offense. It wasn't until senior year at Hayes that he really began becoming more of a staple on defense. And I just thought, okay, if you're not truly going to make him a running back, this whole H-back situation would have fit him great from day one, because he's a capable receiver. That's what he played actually as a sophomore freshman for Hayes. And then he's got this natural ability to run, the freakish athletic ability to withstand tackles and absorb contact. But also, what we saw from him as a receiver in his early playing days at Hayes was a guy who willingly wanted to be a blocker. So to me, it made a ton of sense. It was like, you're going to get basically, for lack of a maybe not as tall. I think Ben Sinnott was like 6'4", but you're going to get all the things that Ben Sinnott was as a receiver and as a blocker, but also a guy that's like capable of running the ball with like 4.4 speed. It made too much sense. I'm very, very intrigued to see, if Oklahoma puts him on the field, and if they put him on the field, how they choose to use him, because I think there's a ton of versatility there for them to unlock late in his career.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to watch. I always felt like his value was on offense in terms of, it's just so hard to take the ball out of that guy's hands. I mean, I love that you brought up the blocking as a wide receiver. We talk all the time about team, fun tape guys. Jaren Kanak basically had offensive line tape at wide receiver as a sophomore, where he had like 6 minutes of him pancaking guys.
Pancake.
In addition to the receiver stuff, as a senior, was a quarterback that really, ran the ball incredibly well, was a big part of Hayes making a deep run in those state playoffs. Love seeing the ball back in his hands. And also, as you know, Ryan, great kid. Love the family. Love the coaches out there at Hayes. Really excited to see what's next for Jaren.
Well, and real quick, just to finish on that, and I know you'll agree with this, Kevin, is kudos to Jaren too, because I think we heard some buzz, and it ended up being very light buzz over the years of, Jaren maybe thinking about the transfer portal, or folks near him maybe thinking that he should or could. And credit to Jaren for sticking it out, and not only sticking it out, maybe that implies that he wanted to go in the portal, but maybe all of us were just wrong. And maybe this was a kid that, found a place that he loved, more than just, looking for playing time. And that's why I think you and I, after all these years, and so many of us in Kansas are still rooting hard for Jaren Kanak to make it at Oklahoma. Would it be easy for us to say, you're rooting for him to not make it so you can maybe see him at KU or see him at K-State? I mean, I guess selfishly, but at this point, I'm so happy that he's gutted it out at Oklahoma, found a place that he loves, that he's happy with. I want it to work at Oklahoma, and I think with this move that it will.
Coming up, we'll have an interview with KCSN's Kent Swanson to talk about local players in the upcoming NFL draft. But first, let's chat about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. We had a blizzard this week, but with it rapidly warming up, has your team gear been found wanting? Home Field gives you a chance to look good while rocking your favorite team colors, regardless of the season, or with our local weather, regardless of the day. Kansas State, and Missouri fans all have more than 40 items to choose from. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story. Like Bryan Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Bryan Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner impossible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Ryan, Tyren Parker, obviously a name that's pretty well known across the state, particularly with him collecting offers, from Kansas and Kansas State so early on. But one of the things we try to do on this show is try to tell fans about high school players they might not know yet, but they should. In last week's player profiles, I picked a Kansas player to watch, with you selecting a player from the Show Me State. Let's flip it this week. So who do you have your eye on here in Kansas?
I'm going to go with one of the guys that I'm probably as high on in this class as any. And we saw, I think a week ago, he's starting to pick up that FCS level steam. And I think that's just going to quickly, the dice is going to fall, or the dominoes are going to fall into more FBS attention. Robert Hunter at Wichita East, just a sensational, dynamic athlete. And here's the thing about him. When you throw the tape on of Robert Hunter, the first thing you're going to see, and the majority of the things that you're going to see, is him at quarterback. And you're going to see it here in the highlights. It's the dynamic ability with the ball in his hands as he parts the sea there and then accelerates. And so it's all about speed with Robert Hunter, and that's very apparent with him at quarterback. But here is the position, as you see him here one-on-one against Desan Brame, no less, that I think is where his collegiate future is, and that's at cornerback. I'm going to tell you a story about Robert Hunter here, going back to when I first kind of saw him last summer and he caught my attention at K-State camp. Oh, I forgot about this clip here, a 7-on-7 clip where he's starting to see him there. We were hoping we were going to see him this weekend in 7-on-7, actually, but he'll be at a camp in Missouri. So we're going to miss him. But I like to see him kind of fine-tuning his skills in the offseason at cornerback, which is why I put that last clip in there. But quick story on him, Kevin, of when I became a fan, when I was proven this is a guy in the state of Kansas. You go back to the final K-State elite camp of the summer last year, and there's this kid from Wichita East, and I figured he was from Wichita East because he kept coming over kind of between reps to talk to a couple of the Wichita East coaches that I'm familiar with, and he kept going from quarterback to cornerback. And I'm like, well, that alone, Kevin, speaks to the athletic ability. So immediately I'm like, I'm going to watch this kid if they feel confident that he can go back and forth here. Well, there's a receiver at that camp for K-State named Cumante Williams. He's from All Saints Episcopal, 6'5", 195, out of Fort Worth, Texas. He ends up being the TAPS Division II Receiver of the Year, signs with Boise State, top 130 receiver in the country. Robert Hunter, who is basically thought to be an offensive first player, is the only guy capable of not only sticking with Cumante Williams, but locking him up at, giving up 5 inches to him. And it was just an uncanny ability of the ball skills that you look for, how he times everything, but he's got a physical body at 6 feet, kind of pushing 180, 185. I think so. It's not like a Jacob Parrish where he's thin with the ball skills. I think he's going to learn to become a really avid tackler with the frame that he already has, but it's the speed that he's able to just stay right in your chest constantly, and the fluidity with the hips that you see when he has the ball in his hands. Kevin, I just think the ceiling is so high on this kid as a cornerback. And again, you flip the tape on and you're not going to see it right away. But I'm telling you, anyone who has seen him do this in person at the cornerback position is instantly going to see what I'm talking about. And if you're willing to take a flyer on this kid early, I think it's going to pan out, and you're going to look very, very smart this fall and later on down the road once he becomes a every day of the week cornerback. I love Robert Hunter.
Gary Patterson put together a lot of elite defenses, taking athletic quarterbacks, flipping them over to defense, and taking advantage of ball skills and the understanding that they have of what offenses want to do, what receivers want to do. Robert Hunter certainly a good pick, and seems like a Gary Patterson type of guy if he were still at TCU. I like that pick a lot, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to like mine as well. Moving over to Missouri, I'm going to head to Central High School in St. Joseph, and a linebacker who really popped when we were looking at our top players around the Kansas City Metro, and that's linebacker Jermaine Collins Jr. It used to be that you look for linebackers who, look like linebackers, guys who were 230, 240 pounds, but colleges have shifted into looking for kind of rangy, athletic kids who have the frame to add weight while keeping that athleticism, guys who look like DBs now, but are not going to be DBs in the future. And Collins is really a guy that fits that mold, and it really shows up on tape, I think. When you watch him, he's a guy that you see the athleticism. It pops immediately. You can see him shooting through gaps. And the number of times that you notice him making plays when people run away from him, it's amazing. He makes plays sideline to sideline, as you saw there. He makes some plays in pass coverage because of his ability to change direction and the natural athleticism that you have. He's got great straight line speed, Ryan, and you always love players in the box who understand leverage like that. There's a reason why. Collins is a pretty good wrestler too. It's something that he's taken on and done really well at. I think as he continues to develop his understanding of what he's doing at linebacker, that was his first year playing linebacker that you saw those clips from. He was a running back before that. You're going to see him play even more downhill. You're going to see the confidence grow and the decision-making. And he's somebody that I would expect when you flip on that senior tape, you're going to see a major pop from where he was as a junior to where he's going to be this next year.
No doubt. The only thing I'll say about Jermaine is the length immediately stands out for me on tape. I'd love to know what his wingspan is because I think he tracks guys down really well, even if he's a step or two behind him. And I love the fact, Kevin, that in his first year as a linebacker, he had to cut his teeth going against Gabe Fields, who's a Vanderbilt commitment at tailback in the 2025 class. So again, like you said, I think the senior tape is really going to pop for him at St. Joe Central.
I agree. And Ryan, for you and I, getting to see players in person is kind of like Christmas. And this weekend brings Turf Wars here in Overland Park with a number of top regional 7-on-7 teams heading to the Shawnee Mission Soccer Complex to do battle. So I'd like to ask you, who are maybe a few players that you're looking forward to getting a chance to watch in person here?
Yeah, well, we've kind of been trying to dissect some of the local rosters, and this is a massive event. I think one of the biggest 7-on-7 tournaments that Kansas City has ever hosted. So tons of talent on display. I'm going to pick two guys for kind of different reasons. The first is a name that will be familiar for folks that have been in tune with our recent shows when we talk about the 2026 class, and that's Robert Haney, the fourth out at Ruskin. He's, I believe, going to be playing on a team coached by another former recruit that you and I covered. Kansas Jayhawk fans will know the name Jaden Russell. He's now coaching on Building Champions. And Robert Haney is a kid that you and I love the tape from Ruskin High School. Big frame receiver, like 6'3", 6'4", and I think eclipsing 200 pounds. So, I mean, everything is there, but a guy that we just haven't seen yet. And I think we'll be able to see more of him this weekend being targeted and doing things like, what is his route tree? What is the explosion like? What is the catch radius? Even more than we'll see in the fall, just because I think the amount of times that he's going to be targeted when it's 7-on-7, there is no running the ball. Everything is throwing, which is different than I think what their kind of strength is at Ruskin. And so just getting an opportunity to see him get more attempts, more touches, will give us a better kind of idea of where he was, because he was fringe top 10 guy for us on the Missouri side in 2026. And then another guy is for a reason kind of in a different way, and that's probably a guy that we haven't had a reason to see. And because of where he's located, I don't know if we would really get to see that easily. Cooper McGowan. He's a 2026 outside linebacker receiver type kid from Ellsworth High School, go Bearcats, which is a 2A school kind of southwest of Salina. Plays for a Sharp Performance 7-on-7. So our friend Jake Sharp has a 7-on-7 team that Robert Hunter would be playing on. So this is Cooper McGowan, same team, but 6'4", 180. Again, a guy that his high school team doesn't throw the ball a lot, and he plays probably more defense than offense. But when he was targeted, Kevin, you got to see some of the athletic ability from him. We're going to see him play a little bit of defense, a little bit of offense this weekend, and it'll give us a better idea maybe of where he is positionally, where we think he is, what kind of athlete he is. Because, again, it's a name where, you watch some of the tape of him, not only on the football field, but on the basketball court. He can get up at the rim, folks. So I'm excited to kind of finally see some of those guys in the flesh and put a little bit more clarity and validity on where we think they are in terms of not only right now, but where they can be as recruits.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and pick a couple bigger names that I'm watching real quick. Nate Sims is a guy I'm really interested to see what the full route tree is, just because it's not necessarily something he's asked to do as much in high school. And so, hey, when you're lined up against a legitimate Division I corner, you're running more varied routes. How does he look? And Jalen Mason is the other one, because Wichita Northwest, they have so much talent and they're well coached and all of those things. That offense is so explosive. 7-on-7, when you bring these kinds of athletes in, the windows are smaller. Decisions have to be quicker. You have to be accurate. And I'm not saying that Jalen can't do those things. I actually think there's a chance that he really thrives this weekend, but it's something that I really want to see him outside of that Wichita Northwest team. I want to see sort of how he fares against that level of competition. And I think there's a chance that he winds up playing pretty well. We should be on hand and have some interviews and breakdowns coming up this next week from that event. But before that happens, we have an interview with KCSN Chiefs and NFL draft expert Kent Swanson after the break. We'll be right back.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. KCSN.substack.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. We're joined by friend of the show and KCSN's own Kent Swanson. Kent, thanks for joining us.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. I met Ryan in a Costco like last week. Absolute pleasure meeting him. A bunch of Olathe guys here now, just talking some ball here. Like I'm excited to be here, guys.
Kevin, Kent gets the siren.
Oh, he gets the siren. Hey,
He gets the siren. Kent gets the
go.
siren. Let's go.
We throw the siren for any commitments. And so, like, when somebody commits, we throw the siren.
He's committed to the show.
We're committed to verbal commitment.
I'm all in with you guys.
That's what I'm saying. We keep it lit here on this show. But first of all, Ken, for those who might be maybe unfamiliar with the KCSN draft guide, it's awesome. Like, a lot of people decide to buy magazines off the rack where your general draft guides, and they just kind of talk about the prospects from a general point of view. This one is all in on the Chiefs. You guys scout each player from a specific Chiefs point of view. When you look at the defensive end, you say, this is what Spags likes in his defensive ends. These are the guys that maybe the Chiefs won't like or take a look at. These are the guys that they probably will, and it winds up working out. Can you take us behind the curtains a little bit in terms of how you guys build that and the process behind that?
Oh yeah. So and you did a really good job like kind of outlining, what the end product looks like. But we're all college football lovers that produce this book. And it's a team of people. It takes a team to put this thing together, and it's a scouting process. We build a big board. We go through the entire thing as a group, and we have checks and balances. We have cross-checking, very similar to what you would see with a regular scouting department. And we're just going through different players and trying to identify, good player fits for the Chiefs too, right? So, it starts, September, October when the tape starts rolling in, right? And like it goes all the way through April. Early April is when this book will release, and but it's fun because we kind of get to go through it as a group and talk through a bunch of different prospects and kind of stack the board how we like it. So, it's, I think, our 7th year doing it, and it's a passion project. It's a lot of work, but it is a passion project for sure.
I'll let you go, Kevin. I'll let you go.
I was going to say, you guys generally split up the positions, right? Like in terms of somebody will take like quarterbacks and defensive ends, somebody will take linebackers, running backs.
Mm-hmm.
What's that look like?
Yeah. So, we split, different different groups up. We go by position. Like there's some scouting, structures that'll say, hey, I'll take SEC guys. I'll take ACC, Big 12, we go by position when we're going through our process. And, some of that is kind of just built on the backgrounds of all of our guys and some of our guys. So like I was a college quarterback, and I mean, I say that lightly because like, they 30 pass attempts in the career or something like that. Nice. But I have the quarterback background. So I take the quarterbacks. I also take linebackers, don't have a linebacker background. So we're all just, we're taking, different positions that might be kind of in tune with some of our strengths in our past, but there's all kinds of cross-checking happening, right? So like, I'm going to get eyes on most of the players, if not all the players that wind up in the draft guide, by the end of this thing. It's just, you got to start, with certain spots. But I've been able to get a good view on a lot of different players to this point, and it's been it's fun. It's gonna be an interesting class.
How neat has it been? I know for Kevin and I, covering him in high school, several of these guys actually, it's been kind of a joy for us. But in kind of watching his progression from, you talked about kind of putting him maybe up on a big board to now, I think seeing him, I've seen top 5 now suddenly for Armand Mimbahu. Product of Lee Summit North. I mean, how cool has it been, I guess, for you to see a local kid take this trajectory? And did you feel like through your conversations putting together the draft guide, obviously he's probably not going to land in Kansas City, but like, did you guys see, I think, what and expect kind of what he's done so far this offseason in training for the draft?
So, and I'll credit Matty Lane. He's my co-host on the show on the KC Laboratory, and he's the guy that was first on Membu for us. And Armand Membu currently sits as the 6th ranked player in our draft right now, in our draft guide right now. We've only handed out 8 first-round grades this year. A little bit lighter on the first-round grades, pretty good middle classes, second and third round prospects. But Armand Membu has earned one of those first round grades for us. And like the tape before the athletic testing, before the Senior Bowl, the tape was really good at Missouri, right? And like you're looking at the frame, you're looking at the build, you're looking at the density in the lower half, but then you're pairing that like a great ability to anchor and all that stuff. But then you pair that with the footwork. And the footwork's outstanding. So he's just aced everything. The tape is really good. And then you pair that with just what he, doing some work at the Senior Bowl, and then what he was able to do at the NFL Combine is just like he has just aced everything. And arm length is going to be acceptable to stick out at tackle for some teams, and that's really big for him. Just to be able to stick out there, that's going to help his draft projection. There's a chance he's the first offensive lineman taken in this draft, which is just absurd to see the climb. And what an impressive kid. Like he's an outstanding football player. There's no chance I think the Chiefs have of being able to get him.
Ken, there was his senior year, quick story. Kevin and I think were there together. I remember it plain as day. And Caden Green was the big prize that everybody was talking about on that offensive line, at least on the North, now at Missouri as well. Mm-hmm. But there was a specific play, and this is when Kevin and I both kind of knew, like, yeah, this guy's different. Like, we need to be looking a little bit harder at Armand Membu from a rating standpoint, because Jamar Mosey puts him out at wide receiver for several plays to basically run like screen plays, and he just blocked all the like cornerbacks that are up at the line of scrimmage trying to block him. The agility and stuff, like it was on another level.
Yeah, it's not surprising, right? And like he's aced everything, right? Like people that interview him at the Senior Bowl we're blown away by him, and just like it's the athleticism, the character, all that kind of stuff. Like he's checking every box, and nothing surprising with this kid. Like you don't see freak athletes like this size move the way he does. It's just he's one of my favorite football players in this class, and it's a bummer that his stock continues to rise the way it does for Chiefs fans at least.
You brought up the interviews, and I think one of the guys that we thought would probably ace a lot of interviews is a guy that I know you've had your eye on for quite a while, and that's Devin Neal. Coming out of Kansas, I remember having conversations with you a couple of years ago, even comparing kind of Devin against Daniel Highshaw, who you thought was an NFL prospect as well in that same backfield at the time. How have you seen Devin grow over the course of his time at Kansas? Because I know you felt like maybe he was a little bit more straight line, and that he got a little bit more loose hipped and developed sort of that elusiveness and things of that nature over the course of his time in Morris.
Yeah, I think the Devin Neal framework for me has always been, I think he's always been an outstanding runner. I think that's been prevalent for the entirety of his career. He's a fantastic runner of the football. And I think the questions for me have always been built around, Neal's ability as a route runner. And so like, that's where some of the hip conversation comes into play. And, not that he's super tight hip, but more just that like he's not able to manipulate his body well as a route runner to help create separation and make, good breaks that are going to help him create separation. Right. And that's, he's always been an outstanding runner. And I think he had an incredible year at Kansas this year as a runner. I think, the questions for me have always been, is he going to be able to extend his value to an NFL team beyond running, right? Beyond being a runner of the football. And, I think Kansas did a pretty good job of giving him some opportunities on some routes, but you're talking more swings and screens and those kind of things than you are, hey, go line up in the slot, run an out route, run an angle route, run an option route. Those questions still remain for me. And like, that's a piece of his projection that I think is it remains to be seen if he's going to do much of that in the NFL. But I think, he's checked every box that he can at, as a runner. And I just think there's some questions with the passing game and some long speed too, right? But like, I love watching him run the football, and I think he's tremendous at it. It's just a matter of like the overall profile. If he's going to be, if he's going to be a guy that can protect, if he's going to be a guy that can go out on, a dynamic route tree.
I thought it was interesting. Kevin and I were texting over the weekend with DJ Giddens running what he ran and Devin running what he ran. It was, in a way, it was surprising, but it was also, first off, it was a little unfair. I don't know if Devin's really like the combine freak that maybe we see DJ as, but Devin sometimes almost feels like he plays faster than he ran, and DJ maybe might be the opposite, or at least sometimes it felt that way on tape. But I all that to say, let's cut to the chase here and put you on the spot for this style show. We've got KU and K-State fans that regularly tune in. Not from Brett Veach's perspective, but if Kent Swanson is the GM of the Chiefs, and we're end of day 2, maybe into day 3, and maybe you need a running back, and both Devin Neal and DJ Giddens are on the board, which way are you going for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Boy, that's tough. And like I know it's tough to just look outside of the prism of like the Chiefs, but even like scheme specific, like I think both of these guys present different things to different schemes. I think they're probably both round 4 guys, and I think you probably give the nod to Giddens right now. Just because of what he did athletically. Like I think that, I think a lot of the tape is actually I think the tape's probably a little bit favorable to Neal, I would say, just from some of the vision stuff and the elusiveness at the second level. I think teams are going to be enamored with some of what Giddens did running the ball, and the smoothness, and the long speed, right? The long speed to run away. I think there's still question marks for him in the passing game too, but like I think I've seen him run a corner route and catch the ball above his, above his head. Like he's made some nice catches in his career. So like he's shown a little bit of that.
They ran mesh rail a lot, I feel like, in K-State, and got him out field on some vertical stuff.
And, so he did some good stuff, and he's probably got more in the passing game there. I will say, like, slim margins, because it's going to be scheme fit, right? I think there is some specificity with scheme. I think they're both very similar in where they get stacked. Medicals will be big for, Devin Neal. If Giddens' bill is cleaner, like that's going to give him a nod too. And like, it seems like Neal's had more injury issues at this point than Giddens has. Does that sound about right? I don't think Giddens has really missed any time in his 3 years at K-State. So I'd probably give the nod to Giddens just in a vacuum.
So between the two, Ken chooses Travion Henderson.
Yeah.
Well, but if we're sitting here, and again, you are Brett Veach, you're sitting in the chair, Armand Membu, probably not going to happen. Which local product would you like to see the Chiefs take? Or would you think that, hey, this is a guy that maybe has a good fit in Kansas City?
So I think a guy that helped himself out tremendously at the NFL Combine was Logan Brown, the tackle for Kansas. And like, look, I mean, he's from Kansas, but he has the 5-star pedigree. He played at Wisconsin. He got some of that Wisconsin, offensive line coaching for a little bit. Comes to Kansas and I think he has a great, final year for the Jayhawks, and he fits the mold of an offensive tackle in the NFL. He checks the boxes with the athletic, with the arm length and the size and the frame. But the athletic testing was great. And like he really helped himself then, and on-field workout. Like he was one of the better performers, I think, in the on-field workout at the NFL Combine. If I'm Kansas, you're talking about, hey, like he's checking the box for arm length, and then he's got this athletic profile that the Chiefs prefer. He's been able to run some of that zone scheme stuff. Like I think Logan Brown would be a guy that if the Chiefs are looking for a day 3 tackle, especially considering they're probably losing Jawan Taylor in 2025. Or in 2026, like Logan Brown, he might make some sense to be a guy that they try to develop there.
What do you think about a guy like Ariante Ursary? If you're looking at offensive tackles, with him being a Ruskin kid, obviously didn't play college ball here locally, but being a Kansas City kid in general.
Yeah, I think Ursary, he's an interesting guy. Where giant frame, some pretty good tackle tackle tape, you kind of question whether or not he is going to have the foot quickness to be able to hold up, as a tackle outside. He looks a little bit heavy footed out in his pass sets. Fine length at the position, can get beat up the arc a little bit, has a little bit of a balance issue from time to time, but you can't find frames like that. You can't find big kids like that. I know there's a range from, late round 1 to early round 3. I think he probably slides in somewhere closer to a round 2 type player. And I think there's questions about whether or not he's going to be able to kick, to stay outside. That being said, though, you talk about some of the things, that he has deficiencies at. Those get masked a little bit more when you're playing along, in the interior and watching him finish plays and watching him with, the kind of run blocking power he has. Like, he's a guy that he's gonna have a long NFL career. It's just a question of where he's going to have it.
Been a busy week for Chiefs fans out there and folks that cover the Chiefs like yourself. I'm curious, with all the moves that are happening in free agency, how much do you feel like that's going to ultimately impact their decision at the end of round 1? Like, if they go out and get a tackle, does that immediately, nix any type of early selection for the Chiefs at that position? Or is there still too much of a need at a given position where just because fans see them take a flyer or something on a free agent in the weeks between now and the draft, that they still might go early and maybe hedge on a player at the same position or a similar position?
Yeah, I don't know how many more multi-year deals the Chiefs are going to hand out this offseason, maybe 1 or 2. Like if they hand out a multi-year deal to a tackle, I could see them just checking tackle off the list of players they might take in round 1. But I think if you look at this team and the roster turnover that they're experiencing, you're probably, there's most positions outside of interior offensive line. You could make a case for the Chiefs taking, not just to make the 2025 roster better, but be ready for another roster turnover in 2026, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So, but if you've told me, hey, they took a running back, a receiver, tight end, tackle still, like if they sign a 1-year tackle and they take one in the first round and have them ready for 2026, I'm not going to be surprised. Everything's on the table. And even some of the moves that this team makes in free agency, like I still think they could. It's pretty open ended at what they do at tackle or at pick 31.
Pretty good cornerbacks at the local school this year.
Yes.
We're giant fans of Jacob Parrish.
Olathe,
who was a guy that we covered at Olathe and did really well basically. Probably not a fit for the Chiefs, though, when you look at what they like in terms of like those longer guys who can jam. Kobe Bryant, likewise, because of how slight he is, I would assume that he would also probably not be a guy real high up the Chiefs board. But I was curious for your thoughts on Mello Dotson, being a longer guy, being a little bit thicker. I know he didn't mention or measure quite as tall and long, maybe as we thought he might at the combine, but still, is Mello a guy that in those middle rounds, because the Chiefs have done really well in the middle of the later rounds with taller cornerbacks, is he somebody that would be kind of on your radar as a Chiefs guy?
So I think he could potentially be on the radar for the Chiefs, but I think honestly he's probably looking at more of like a round 7 right now. I personally, for me, just because he had some struggles testing athletically, right? Like it wasn't the best showing for him. 4.6 40, 192 pounds. That wasn't great for him, and for the Chiefs specifically. Like, I think he wants to play with his eyes on the quarterback and being able to see the play in front of him. And like, from a press alignment, he's not as good as he is when he's being able to kind of drive and make plays on the ball. I'm fascinated to see how the Chiefs would view it, because he does have some, interesting measurables for them. I actually think, Parrish, because of his size, like maybe he is a fit for the Chiefs as like a slot player, right? Yeah. Like just because like if he goes and kicks inside, like he's got a great athletic profile. The tape's very good. Yep. The Chiefs, I don't think they're actively trying to have a ton of short, small corners, but like the tape's really good, man. And like he had, a really high quality athletic profile. Maybe he's a guy that they try to look as a slot defender potentially. So I could see him as a fit, and he's probably going earlier than the Chiefs wind up taking one though.
Well, and for all the talk about Mimbu and the weekend that Jacob Parrish had, and along with the Senior Bowl, we would be remiss as a local show to not give major praise to my guy, Jalen Knoll.
Yes.
4.39 40, 41.5 vert, 11.2 broad, 23 reps on the bench for my guy. And I say that to kind of lead into my final question. Jalen Knoll's one of my kind of draft darlings. Gray Zabel would be kind of like my other draft darling, more from like the early round, maybe Jalen more your day 3 guy. But who are kind of the Kent Swanson like draft darlings? Maybe one that might go day 1 and maybe a sleeper that you really like. And maybe, again, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself to just the Chief fits. Maybe it could be guys that might not even fit the Chiefs.
Ooh, that's a great question. You have to give me a second. I'll tell you, Gray Zabel, we have him as the 27th best prospect in the class right now. That's kind of where his grade sits. And like, that's a really nice one. As far as like round 1 guys, like a darling for me, like one player I'm paying attention to, is Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. So, he plays guard for a good chunk of the season for the Buckeyes. Joshua Simmons gets hurt. Simmons, we'll see where his fall goes with the patella injury. Like, we'll see. But Donovan Jackson goes out and plays tackle and performs really well. Like, he does a great job out there. Like, looks like a tackle, plays tackle like a tackle. Like, we talk about like Joe Tooney going out and doing what he did was like tremendous, but like he kind of played tackle like a guard, right? If we're being honest, just putting him out there, holding on for dear life. So Donovan Jackson's one that I really like. Let's see. As far as like the mid-round sleepers, I like Danny Stutzman. Danny Stutzman's a guy I'd like to see potentially in Kansas City, depending on what the Chiefs do with the linebacker situation. Because if you're talking about a big, surprisingly good linear athlete, like he was a lot more athletic than I thought he was heading into the NFL Combine. And I know it's a lot of linear explosion and not maybe the change of direction, which definitely there's some stiffness there. But if you're talking about like a 2-down, early down type linebacker, Stutzman out of OU he's got, good size, good physicality for the position. I think he's got really good instincts. I think there's questions about him as a coverage player. And if he's just having to drop and run, like that's a lot easier for him than having to try to match up in man coverage. But like if the Chiefs are looking to, try to take somebody like that, like that's another player that I would be really interested in like the mid rounds.
Can't you just unknowingly like tied a bow on this show for us? Because we started the first segment out with Jaren Kanak. We finished half show with Danny Stutzman, the 2 OU bad brothers. Case closed.
I did have one more question.
Oh, go for it.
Is the Chiefs' nightmare scenario, or not nightmare, but Luther Burden falling to that pick where you're kind of having to decide between, hey, we've got some needs here that need to be filled, but also there's this really dynamic guy that's sitting right there that we would really like to have Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball to. And what do you feel about that potential scenario? Because it feels like in mock drafts now, Luther Burden's kind of starting to fall to that range a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's some questions there with that Burden's going to have to answer over the course of the, of the rest of the process. I think he tested tremendously, right? It's like that's good. Like I know there was a production drop off in 2024 for him, but he's in a vacuum. I'd love to see Luther Burden in Kansas City because the 2023 tape is ridiculous, and like the idea of him being able to be in Kansas City, if he talked about this 18 months ago, would be like absurd. Fit for KC's a little tricky, and we go back and forth and have this debate a lot because of his fall recently. It's like, would you like Luther Burden in KC? And I think there is some crossover from what they get out of Xavier Worthy and what they get out of Rashee Rice, and more specifically Rice. Like Rashee Rice and Luther Burden are very similar players. Luther's a little bit faster, so you'd have to get pretty creative, and I don't know if any of those guys play enough outside to justify being able to mix all those three together, right? So if you ask Matty Lane, it's the most chaotic, hilarious scenario, as if Luther Burden's there and they don't take him. But I think from a fit, I think it is kind of a tricky fit for them because of what they already have on the roster. But I mean, very good player. Very good player. I love this local class, man. I'm so hyped for this is such a good local class. And like we've actually had a chance to talk to several of them already during the pre-draft process. And it's hard not to root for a lot of these kids. All three schools. They're just a great group of kids and a great class.
Ken, I'm asking for your fans and not for bill collectors. Where can people find you?
Not on a beach, unfortunately. At Kent_Swanson on Twitter, and you can find links to purchase the KCSN draft guide if you feel so inclined over there. I'm always retweeting it, so you can find it there.
Well, thanks again, Ken, for joining us, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, comment below, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.